And then you can go ahead and start.
We're going to go ahead and get started for those of you who want to take their seats. Here we go. Do I do the gavel thing?
Yeah.
Okay.
Good morning. Okay, we'll come to order back.
Okay. Good morning. Can you all hear me? The committee will come to order. And we want to thank everyone for joining us this morning, and I want to especially thank all of our witnesses for being here today. Throughout the history of industrialized economies, the primary goal of a business was to make money, and the chief objective of corporations was to increase shareholder value above all else. This approach has had clear benefits. Over the last 4 decades, American-owned firms have become the largest, most visible companies in the world, and the United States has established itself as the world's largest and most innovative free market. At the same time, however, this approach to corporate governance has drawbacks. In this system, companies are incentivized to cut costs to maximize profits. This can lead companies to overlooking the impact that their decisions have on the environment, their communities in which they operate, and the personal well-being of their employees. The global economy has reduced prices on many consumer goods, but business practices that reward cost-cutting measures have depressed wages, which puts home ownership, education, and class mobility, the staples of the American dream, out of reach for many Americans and contributes to an ever-widening economic income inequality gap. As the 21st century pushes on and public opinion on issues such as climate change and equity in the workplace continue to evolve, the idea of shareholder primacy is not only being begun to look at as being short-sighted, but is also increasingly looking like bad business. Consumer preferences are shifting, and they expect companies to practice social and environmental responsibility. And in fact, recent market surveys suggest that consumers are much more likely to purchase goods and services from companies that embrace environmentally and socially responsible business practices. And they're willing to pay a little bit more to do so. Already, there is a growing community of entrepreneurs and small business owners embracing a more socially and environmentally responsible version of capitalism, driven by the idea of corporate social responsibility. Corporate social responsibility, or CSR, is an umbrella term used to refer to voluntary actions taken by private businesses that enhance a company's commitment to managing the social, environmental, and economic effects of its operations responsibly and in line with the public's expectations. There is not a defined set of CSR initiatives, but actions are generally related to creating value both for customers and employees, promoting diversity and inclusion, supporting the communities in which they are located, and protecting the environment. Companies that adopt these practices see their employees and the environment, the communities in which they operate, and the products and services that they provide as equally important for long-term growth and financial success. They see offering benefits such as health insurance, paid family leave, and a representative voice and ownership for employees to increase worker productivity, lower turnover, and they see that it increases worker productivity, lower turnover, and provides a competitive edge in talent recruitment. Evidence suggests that firms embracing CSR are better able to survive during market downturns. In the wake of the 2009 recession, companies engaged in CSR activities reported average sales growth of 13% and profit growth of 12%, compared to 6% and 4% for companies that focused on cost cutting. And we know that over the years, many small firms have already been engaging in some of these socially and environmentally responsible activities. Small firms have been building sustainable businesses, investing in their workers, dealing fairly with suppliers, and creating valuable goods and services, while also providing jobs on Main Street. Today, we have the privilege of hearing testimony from our expert panel, who will share with us best practices for our small businesses as we change our perspectives of sustainable business and capitalism. I look forward to your guidance and to working with my colleagues on both sides of the aisle to ensure that businesses of all sizes are created not just for jobs and profits, but also to positively contribute to their surrounding communities, to the environment, and to our society as a whole. And I would like now to yield to the ranking member, Mr. Stauber, for his opening statement.
Thank you very much, Chair Houlihan. It's a privilege to be here with you today. Thanks for holding this hearing, and thank you to the witnesses. You know, today the committee has come together to recognize the achievements of small businesses that have involved themselves with a corporate social responsibility, frequently shortened to CSR. Our panel will help us understand what small businesses can do and are doing, and what this committee can do to support these initiatives. Examples of CSR can be found throughout America's business history. Early examples include factory owners providing housing for their employees. Now CSR has expanded to include environmental efforts, philanthropy, and volunteerism. Some small business owners may think that CSR is an activity that only large corporations engage in. However, small businesses frequently participate in activities that encompass CSR values without recognizing or tracking them as CSR initiatives. Small businesses can choose an area of CSR that contributes positively to their community and/or customer base and can benefit from tax breaks, increased consumer and profits, and greater employee loyalty. I look forward to hearing from our panel about the benefits they have experienced. Thank you, Madam Chair, and I yield back.
Thank you, Mr. Stauber. The gentleman yields back. And if committee members have an opening statement prepared, I would ask that they be submitted for the record. I would just like to take a couple minutes to explain the timing and the rules. Each witness gets 5 minutes to testify, and each member gets 5 minutes for questioning. There is a lighting system to assist you. The green light will be on when you begin, and the yellow light will come on when you have 1 minute remaining. The red light will come on when you're out of time, and we ask that you try to stay in the time frame to the best of your ability. I would now like to introduce our witnesses. Our first witness is Dr. Robert Strand, the Executive Director of the Center for Responsible Business and lecturer at the Berkeley Haas School of Business. His research and teaching compares U.S. and Nordic approaches to sustainable and socially responsible business. He holds a Ph.D. in corporate social responsibility from the Copenhagen Business School and an MBA in international business from the University of Minnesota. He was a United States Fulbright Scholar to Norway and spent a decade in industry at IBM and at Boston Scientific. Thank you, Dr. Strand, for being here today. Our second witness is Mr. Vincent Stanley. Mr. Stanley is the co-author of The Responsible Company and has served in a variety of roles with Patagonia since its founding in 1973. He held executive positions as the head of sales and marketing and is now the chief storyteller for Patagonia and the director of Patagonia Philosophy. He is also a visiting fellow at the Yale School of Management. Thank you, Vincent, for being here today. I would like now to introduce our third witness, Ms. Christy Wallace. Christy is the CEO of Elevate Network and is responsible for executing their mission of changing the culture of business from the inside out by providing professional women with a supportive community to lean on and learn from. She is the host of the Elevate podcast and is a speaker and thought leader on leadership, diversity, social entrepreneurship, and networking. Most recently, Christy was recognized as a woman of influence by the New York Business Journal. Welcome, Ms. Wallace. Our fourth witness today is Mr. Jamie Arroyo, an associate at Work Wisdom located in Lancaster, Pennsylvania, very close to my district. For over a decade, he has worked in various positions within banking with a mission to help clients reach their personal and business financial goals. During this same time, Mr. Arroyo has also built his own real estate business, investing and managing in properties in Lancaster, Pennsylvania. He completed his MBA at Drexel and was recently elected curator for the Global Shapers Lancaster Hub, an initiative of the World Economic Forum. He facilitates the Review Club for Work Wisdom, where he leads discussions about relevant business trends and leadership development. Welcome. I would now like to yield to our ranking member, Mr. Stauber, to introduce our final witness.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I am very excited to introduce our final witness, Shaun Mcelwee. Shaun is the owner and creative force behind Shaunees, a T-shirt company he started with the intent of raising awareness and inclusion for people with Down syndrome all over the world. He comes to us from Southern California, and you may recognize him from the Emmy Award-winning unscripted reality series Born This Way. His company got its name from something Shaun's parents used to say to people when he was young. When others struggled to understand Shaun's speech, his parents would say, "He spoke Shaunese." Now he puts his unique sayings on shirts so that everyone can speak Shaunese. Shaun has been on a mission to let the world know, and new parents know, that having Down syndrome is nothing to be afraid of. To showcase this, Shaun has been driven since the beginning of his company's creation to give back. He began by donating 10% of his profits each month to nonprofits all over before zeroing in on his project to provide free and low-cost baby onesies to Down syndrome organizations for new parents. $1 from every item purchased goes towards his, in quotations, Welcome Baby Onesies mission. Accompanying Shaun today is his mother and chief dream facilitator, Shaun Mcelwee. Sandra has been an advocate for those with Down syndrome for many years. She has authored 3 books on the experience of having a son with Down syndrome. Shaun and Sandra, it is a distinct pleasure to have you here today. You're a role model.
Mr. Ranking Member, will you yield for just a second?
I will.
I
Go ahead.
want to commend you on your statement and how important this issue is to you and your family, and you being such a leader on these issues yourself, and showing so many of us how we should respond in Congress and to our witness. I'll just say we're all your witnesses. We're just so happy that you're here and look forward to your testimony.
Thank you.
Whenever you're ready to resume.
I appreciate that. Shaun, you are a role model. Especially to kids like my Isaac, who also has Down syndrome. I can't wait to hear more from your story. Thank you, Madam Chair, and I yield back.
Thank you. It's a privilege to serve with you. And now, Dr. Strand, you are recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you. I'm Robert Strand, Executive Director of the Center for Responsible Business and faculty member at the University of California, Berkeley. I also hold the title of Associate Professor of Leadership and of Sustainability with the Copenhagen Business School in Denmark. The 20th century was defined in large part by the ideological battle between American capitalism and Soviet communism. The 21st century will be defined by whether American capitalism sufficiently meets our collective needs and tackles our greatest challenges, including climate change, growing inequalities, decent work for all, and threats to our democratic institutions. The 17 UN Sustainable Development Goals succinctly articulate these needs and challenges. The success of American capitalism in the 21st century will be measured against the Sustainable Development Goals. With this in mind, I deeply welcome the recent restatement of the purpose of the corporation by the Business Roundtable to embrace a stakeholder view of the firm. This represents a pragmatic step to improve American capitalism, as a stakeholder view increases our likelihood to successfully achieve the Sustainable Development Goals. A stakeholder view states that the purpose of a firm is to provide value to its stakeholders. It represents a stark shift from the previous stated purpose known as shareholder primacy, long promoted by the American economist Milton Friedman, that prescribes a lone corporate purpose to maximize profits. Dr. Friedman was a central figure in the ideological battle between American capitalism and Soviet communism. For Friedman, anything other than a free market response was the enemy, and profit-maximizing firms were central to Friedman's view of the free markets. Friedman contended anyone suggesting firms have a responsibility beyond profit maximization, such as avoiding pollution or addressing discrimination, were, quote, preaching pure and unadulterated socialism, end quote. That use of the word socialism is a Cold War ideological relic. It served its purpose then, but I cringe at its use today. The Business Roundtable's restatement helps us move past these tired old ideological debates. I now turn attention to smart policy and corporate governance structures necessary to best ensure the Business Roundtable's words are turned into durable action supportive of a stakeholder view. B Corps presents great promise. 2012, when Patagonia became the first California company to sign up for B Corp certification, its founder, Yvon Chouinard, stated that B Corps created the necessary legal framework through which Patagonia could remain committed to a stakeholder view even through changes in ownership. B Corps has yet to be widely tested in the domain of public corporations, where I also look to examples from elsewhere in the world for institutionalizing a stakeholder approach en masse. Chiefly, I look to the Nordic countries, comprised of Denmark, Finland, Iceland, Norway, and Sweden, given the Nordics are originators of the stakeholder view of the firm and have developed a variety of corporate governance structures that support the stakeholder view. This includes the Danish Industrial Foundation model. Leading Danish firms like Carlsberg and Novo Nordisk are public corporations whose majority of voting rights are held in perpetuity by an associated industrial foundation. This enables the company's management to embrace a long-term perspective supportive of a stakeholder view. The 1969 Foundation Law prevents such a structure in the U.S. We may want to revisit this. A stakeholder view also comes with challenges. Patagonia is widely heralded as a responsible company in part because it provides a key stakeholder, its employees, with benefits like fully paid parental leave, access to quality childcare, paid medical leaves, and sufficient health care coverage. I applaud Patagonia, as such offerings are widely recognized as beneficial to society, but I have significant concerns for a capitalistic system that pushes such responsibilities into the domain of business. This is inefficient and can unintentionally exacerbate inequalities. Furthermore, it redirects the precious resources of small and medium-sized companies who may not be able to satisfy these demands. My experiences in the Nordics have convinced me there's a much more efficient and equitable way to handle these things. I believe small business can be a champion of pragmatic explorations to consider what might work better in an American context. In closing, I would like to point out that small business is the most trusted institution in the United States. I'm deeply concerned about mounting populist attacks on the concept of capitalism, but I'm equally concerned about inaction on the part of our business and political leaders to go about the pragmatic work of improving our version of American capitalism so it best meets our needs and tackles our greatest challenges. As representatives of the most trusted institution in the United States, this congressional committee has the opportunity, and dare I say responsibility, to assume a leadership role to usher in a new era of American capitalism in which the stakeholder view is mainstreamed and the challenges represented by the Sustainable Development Goals are met. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Strand. Mr. Stanley, you are now recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you for inviting me to speak with you today. Recently, this committee heard testimony from 4 of my colleagues in the outdoor recreation industry who all spoke of their love for their experience in the natural world. Something changes for all of us when we get a mile from the road and begin to experience in the presence of nature both our self-reliance and our vulnerability. Reverence for this experience has attracted many to the outdoor industry, not to make a killing, but a living, to put at the center of their life and work something they care about deeply. We in the outdoor industry are not the only ones with this desire. The majority of America's small businesses begin with the impulse to put at the center of work some interest, obsession, or skill, and to engage with others of like mind, heart, and need. Small businesses are by definition rooted in community, either a shared place or activity. Patagonia, no longer a small business, is still rooted in communities of sport, climbers, anglers, hikers, and of place. For decades, we have helped fund hundreds of small grassroots organizations working to save a beloved local patch of land or stretch of water. Every beloved place needs help in a time of what Pope Francis has called a single complex crisis, which is both social and environmental, one marked by perilous inequality and multiple existential threats to nature, from a carbon-saturated atmosphere, acidifying and plastic-choked oceans, dwindling freshwater, lost topsoil, and a thinning of the web of life that threatens our resilience and our capacity to thrive. We know how important it is to act locally, how much we all need vibrant communities where most of the money stays in town, where citizens can fully care for what they love, to improve the vitality of the neighborhood, but also of the bioregion that makes life in a neighborhood possible, the local streams, farms, forest, and wildland. This single complex crisis has hit so far people in places far from popular view, the poor in the desolate inner city or hollowed-out rural town, the shrinking polar ice, the submerging tropical islands. But now the crisis is coming home everywhere. Palm Beach is not immune to sea level rise. Santa Barbara, my hometown, knows and fears wildfire in winter. The acceleration of this twin crisis, as well as new job-displacing technology, is changing the way all businesses view their future. We know there will be new rules and conditions, and we have no strong idea of what they'll be. But the moral imperative is clear. The crisis demands that businesses understand our impacts, minimize the harm we do, and generate products and services that improve the quality of human life in communities and restore to health living systems, water, soil, and atmosphere. The young demand this as well. The social and natural systems we elders see as declining, they taste as desert. Business has a role to play in the turnaround. Focusing on the needs of others can be as good for business and society as it is for individuals within families to ground business strategy and operations in the real world. In our experience at Patagonia, the social and environmental constraints we placed on ourselves have led to innovations creating business that is better in all ways. Our customers are loyal and more numerous, our employees engaged, our ability to make a sustainable profit has not been hurt by the steps we have taken to do the right thing. The B Corp movement has been a critical part of our work and that of thousands of other values-based businesses. The independently verified B Impact Assessment provides our individual companies a thorough, systemic look at all our practices that benefit or burden all stakeholders, from employees to suppliers to communities to nature. Moreover, in light of the Business Roundtable's recent restatement of the purpose of a corporation, the impact assessment can now serve as a blueprint for those in publicly traded companies who wish to join us, who are willing to make, in the words of Alcoholics Anonymous, a searching and fearless inventory of their social and environmental responsibilities and then act on them. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Stanley. Ms. Wallace, you're now recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you for the invitation to testify here today. Small businesses are at the core of our nation's economy. From family stores on your street corners to bustling innovative startups, supporting today's and tomorrow's entrepreneurs is a responsibility of each of us in order to ensure continued economic and social progress. The very notion of the American dream is built on the opportunities we provide for individuals to dream for a brighter future for themselves and their communities. I've seen this firsthand during my 30 years working with small businesses. From my dad's dental office to waitressing for a family-owned restaurant to multiple startups in New York City, and finally as the CEO of Elevate Network, a community dedicated to supporting women at work, I've seen the obstacles that small businesses go through and the power that they are capable of achieving. Small businesses are resilient, strong, and innovative like no other. Recently, the Business Roundtable released a new statement on the purpose of a corporation. Signed by 181 top CEOs, including Accenture and Apple, this statement signified a shift from businesses driven by shareholder primacy to businesses driven for the benefit of all stakeholders. This is an important step towards changing the landscape of business and the world. But now it needs to be backed up with clear progress and action. Small businesses are in a unique position to pave the way for large-scale business transformation, and it is only fitting for a government to support small businesses further in being drivers of social good. First, we have to recognize that the corporate social responsibility landscape is quickly changing and evolving. CSR today lies in ensuring transparency and ethical governance, providing training, benefits, decent compensation, and flexibility to our employees. creating quality jobs in and for our communities that need it most, and being intentional about our relationships with suppliers, distributors, as well as environmental impact. Adopting a holistic approach to corporate social responsibility is not only important to support our small businesses, but key to supporting the future of our economy and our nation as a whole. Second, we need to measure what matters. Just as businesses have set structures around financial reporting, businesses also need a framework for measuring social impact and sustainability. Several years ago, Elevate Network joined companies such as Patagonia, Eileen Fisher, and The Honest Company by becoming a certified B Corporation in order to underline and measure our commitment to benefit the communities in which we exist and operate. In a span of 2 years, our B Corp score rose from 88 to 115 on a scale of 200. That's progress. But I'd also like to note that our business revenues doubled during that time period, illustrating that being good for society is also good for business. Through certifications such as this one, we are able to clearly measure the impact our companies have on the greater society and hold ourselves to a high standard of reporting, transparency, and rigor. Without such standardized requirements, it is virtually impossible to distinguish those organizations that put social good at the heart of their business from the others. Once we have the measurement mechanism in place, we then need to put it into practice. When addressing distribution of funds, rewards, tax exemptions, and opportunities, we must prioritize those who make it their duty to prioritize the well-being of their communities and environments. It is time that we harness the power of our legal and governing bodies to further support those small businesses that make social good a priority. Finally, we need to address the main obstacles keeping small businesses, particularly those of women and minorities, from achieving sustainability. Both groups suffer from unequal pay practices, lack of advancement opportunities, and implicit and explicit bias at work. Working caregivers face additional disadvantages due to insufficient paid leave funding. And even though entrepreneurship among these groups is on the rise, female founders still receive only 2% of VC funds available. Given the disparities in funding and access to opportunities, it is crucial that we support women and minorities financially in starting and maintaining their small businesses. Creating the future of entrepreneurship is no easy task, and I am grateful for the work that your committee is doing and has done in the past to both empower and further support the groups that need it most. As small businesses continue to be change makers, we must address the systemic discrimination, inequalities, and barriers that they face every day. Elevate's mission-driven approach, as well as B Corp certification, is just a small example of how organizations can succeed financially while driving positive impact. With continued innovation, improved policies and measurement practices, and the never-ending dedication of the entrepreneurs who go to work every day in the hopes of building a better future, we have the unique opportunity to mold the American dream into one that supports the social good of our people, our nation, and our world. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Wallace. I now recognize Mr. Arroyo for 5 minutes.
Good morning. Thank you, Representative Houlihan and the entire Committee on Small Business. My name is Jamie Arroyo. I'm the managing partner at Work Wisdom, a certified B Corp that helps organizations revolutionize achievement by using a variety of tools, disciplines, and evidence-based practices to instill high-performance mindsets, behaviors, habits, and organizational culture. I'm a member of Global Shapers, an initiative of World Economic Forum, where we take global issues like climate change and execute on local solutions like a Pass on Plastic campaign that we did locally. I'm also a graduate of Drexel University, where I earned my MBA with a focus on entrepreneurship and innovation management. And over the past few years, I have helped over 100 entrepreneurs from underrepresented communities start and grow their businesses in an effort to build an equitable and ethical economy, using tools such as microfinance and business plan training. Today, I help organizational leaders embrace corporate social responsibility in an effort to shift the purpose of business from increasing shareholder value to increasing stakeholder value. This requires leadership in business to focus on the triple bottom line: people, planet, and then profit. Research done by the American Federation of Labor and Congress of Industrial Organizations show that S&P 500 firm CEOs were paid 361 times as much as average U.S. workers in 2017. Despite promises from over 200 nations to address climate change, a recent report from the United Nations states that we are no closer to slowing rising temperatures, and we will need to take drastic action in order to reach climate action goals. Through business, embracing corporate social responsibility means empowering, caring for, and improving the quality of life for our most important asset, our people, and our most important resource, our planet. While we can spend hours discussing the troubles that our society faces today, the fight against inequality and the war against climate change, we understand that our country wasn't built by being against something, but rather standing for a just cause. The American dream that so many have sacrificed for includes the very powerful tool of entrepreneurship. Here lies not only the backbone of our economy, but the power to create a future that is sustainable and prosperous for all. It is through embracing corporate social responsibility in business that we can solve many of our challenges. In Lancaster, Pennsylvania, we have embraced business for good. As a growing part of the B Corp movement, many businesses, such as Work Wisdom, have used the B Impact Assessment by B Lab, creators of the B Corp certification, to measure and improve social and environmental performance. Our business community understands that you can improve what you don't measure. After meeting the rigorous standards of the assessment, you are eligible for the B Corp certification, a stamp of approval that consumers in Lancaster have become familiar with and now use to make purchasing decisions to make sure that every dollar that they spend is adding value in more than just one way. Certified B Corps are taking corporate social responsibility a step further by voluntarily meeting high standards of transparency, accountability, and performance. These businesses don't look like Tesla, and these entrepreneurs don't look like Mark Zuckerberg. They look like Passenger Coffee, a woman-owned coffee shop and roaster that has employee-friendly policies and environmentally sustainable business practices. They look like the Stroopy Company that not only makes delicious Stroop waffles in Lancaster, but also provides meaningful employment to refugees who are starting over in Lancaster, Pennsylvania. There is an opportunity for us to do more. Our leaders in government have the opportunity to encourage business to think long-term rather than short-term by encouraging states to adopt and promote benefit corporation legislation that would legally allow the, quote, best interests of the corporation to include positive impact on society, workers, the community, and the environment instead of only profit. Currently, only 35 states and Washington, D.C. have passed this legislation. Our leaders in business can challenge their peers to shift from a mindset of competition to a mindset of collaboration. Larry Fink, CEO of one of the world's largest asset managers, BlackRock, wrote a letter to CEOs in 2018 explaining that companies must be able to state their strategies for long-term growth that not only benefit shareholders, but also stakeholders, all stakeholders, using purpose to drive results and positive impact. Embracing corporate social responsibility doesn't mean sacrificing profits, but rather elevating the value of employees and our planet. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Arroyo. I now recognize Mr. McElwee for 5 minutes.
My name is Sandra McElwee, and I am the Chief Dream Facilitator for Shawnee's, a T-shirt company founded by my son, Shaun.
Hi, my name is Shaun Mcelwee. I'm the President and Chief Creator Officer of Shawnee's. A T-shirts company I founded in 2017. In my business in California, Shawnee's is a macro enterprise for profits, and the 2.5 years totally $32,000. I'm on a mission to show the world that people have with Down syndrome can have a business and give back. My mom is going to tell you that rest of the story.
So Shaun is the creative genius between over 130 designs on 12 different styles of shirts available on his website, and I assist him with the accounting and administration of his business. I'm a volunteer employee, and Shaun has threatened to fire me a few times. Shaun is best known for his role on the Emmy-winning television show Born This Way on the A&E network. This unscripted show followed the lives of 7 adults with Down syndrome and created many opportunities for Shaun. Because of the show, Shaun was invited to deliver keynote speeches, and while writing his speech, he had the idea to put his own words onto T-shirts. Well, I encouraged Shaun's entrepreneurial spirit in hopes it could be a solution for long-term, meaningful employment. Many people with disabilities find their best option for employment is starting their own business. In fact, 1 in 10 employed persons with disabilities are self-employed. While Shaun has had some jobs in the community, sadly, they didn't work out on a long-term basis. As Shaun's business conceptualized, there was never a question that Shaun would give back in a way to promote social good. Shaun initially made a list of 12 organizations that have provided him with support and advocacy and donated to one of each organization each month the first year of his business. Today, representatives from 3 of those organizations are present to support him: Respectability, the National Down Syndrome Congress, and the National Down Syndrome Society. Each month his first year, Shaun donated a minimum of $100 to each organization, and his first year donations totaled $1,690, which was 16% of his first year's profit. At Shawnee's, we measure success differently than most businesses. Shawnee's has not realized enough profit to live off of, but the creative outlet for Shaun and the impact he is making by showing the world that people with Down syndrome can contribute to their community is where we measure the success. Shaun's donation program then evolved when he was contacted by the Down Syndrome Connection of the Bay Area in Northern California for a bulk order of his baby onesies for their new parent gifts. The same time, the disturbing news that Iceland had achieved a 100% abortion rate for babies with Down syndrome broke. Shaun knew he wanted to inspire new parents and help their babies, and he changed his program from cash donations to
donate baby veggies.
And so to date, Shaun has had 37 Down syndrome organizations in 22 states apply for 2,410 baby onesies. Shaun donates $1 from each shirt sold towards the purchase of the onesies. He also includes a letter to the new parents encouraging them to never give up on their dreams for their babies. This program also shows the new parents that someone with Down syndrome is capable of owning his own business as well as giving back with part of his profits. The remainder of the profits fund his ABLE account. Thank you for allowing Shaun and myself to tell the story of how a micro business with very low profits is still able to make a difference and give back to the community.
Thank you.
Excellent, excellent job, and right on time, literally right on time. So I now recognize myself for 5 minutes to ask a few questions. And my first question is for Mr. Stanley, please. Market research indicates that over the last decade, consumer demand has shifted towards companies that market goods and services as more sustainable. How has this trend impacted Patagonia's profitability, marketability, and long-term outlook, in your opinion?
We've had a considerable amount of growth since 2007, which is, I think, the first year that you started to see studies that showed that people were willing to pay for sustainability. I think that what we're hoping for is that the Sustainable Apparel Coalition, which is a coalition of all the major apparel and footwear companies that sell half of the clothing and footwear on the planet, will come up with a consumer-facing index this year that will give an environmental and social rating for every product in the store. You hold your cell phone up against a hang tag, see that rating, and we're hoping that with better information, consumers will care even more about what goes into their clothes and what they'll buy.
Thank you. That was a terrific answer. Ms. Wallace, can you talk a little bit about how valuable it is for women entrepreneurs to have a network of similarly situated peers and what they can learn from one another?
Oh, I love this question. Thank you. Yeah, I mean, it's all about your community and who supports you. If you're starting a business, it is an overwhelming time. You're thinking about legal structures, finance, accounting, building products and services. You don't have all of those skill sets. Being able to tap into a community that is there to support you is critical for small businesses to grow and grow quickly. It's also having the community support, not just as customers, but those that are there to provide guidance and peer mentorship has been incredibly valuable for me, as it is for all of the small business owners in our community. I think finally there is a big connection between small businesses and bigger businesses and how we best support each other, learn from each other, and leverage those relationships to grow. And that's very important to elevate, which is how we really look at the diversity of our community and how we lift each other up as a community to see the greatest impact.
Thank you. And with the remaining 2.5 minutes of my time, I'm going to try and get to everybody. Mr. Arroyo, we talked about CSR as having an important element, which is diversity and inclusion, but we don't focus necessarily on this as being a positive thing. Can you explain why companies that have get a competitive edge who have a diversity and inclusion angle to them?
Definitely. I mean, research studies have shown that companies that are more inclusive and have more equitable workplaces actually outperform their competition. And when you have a more inclusive workforce at all levels, not just at the front line, which we start to see a lot of diversity in the front line, but once you start getting to management and executive levels, it starts to look a certain way. The more inclusive an environment can be, the more different perspectives a business can have. And with those different perspectives come innovation and creativity to come up with problems to different challenges.
Mr. Mcelwee and Mom, I would love to know what you found in your journey so far that would help enable more people like you to be able to create businesses. How can we be helpful?
Well, that's a very difficult question because there's so much that goes into a business in general that and a lot of people don't have. I happen to have a business degree, so I was able to help Shaun with setting up his business. One thing I think that's very helpful is the small business associations that are in each city that help at the SCORE, I believe is what it is, that help people get started, and maybe to encourage them to reach out more to the community of people with disabilities to help them start their businesses when their family doesn't have the expertise needed.
That's a terrific idea, and we will definitely take that one back. And my last question for Dr. Strand, your focus in your research has been primarily on how other nations are handling this particular issue and challenge of evolving capitalism. What have we learned from them that we could possibly apply to our nation as we're increasingly understanding the power of purpose in business?
I think that
20 seconds.
The primary thing I take from the Nordic region is that they've drawn from the American economist Arthur Oken that in a capitalistic society, the markets need a place, and the markets need to be kept in their place. They've pragmatically figured out where do markets work well, and then use them, and where they don't, and then we need different solutions.
Thank you. Thank you. I now yield to the ranking member, Mr. Staubert, for his time.
Thank you, Chair Houlihan. And thanks for the testimony from the witnesses. Everything, or much of you said, was very relevant to today. And Dr. Strand, coming from the University of Minnesota, we do a lot of great things in Minnesota, as you can testify. My question is to Shaun and Mom. In your testimony, you discussed a few areas that helped lead you to the decision to donate to a new parent baskets. Can you tell us why this specific mission was so important to you?
Do you want to answer that? Well, when Shaun was born, we learned that many people don't choose to not continue their pregnancies when they have a prenatal diagnosis of Down syndrome. And unfortunately, doctors don't always give the current facts on people with Down syndrome's abilities and possibilities. So we've worked for many years to try to correct that. And so it just kind of worked that, Shaun donating the baby onesies to encourage the new parents would be, his mission.
Shaun, you want to answer a little bit?
Oh, yes. My advice for these people to listen to your advice because it means the whole world to it because I all love you.
Oh, wonderful. Thank you, Shaun. You know, you're an inspiration to us here today. Your abilities far outshine. They far outshine your disabilities. And appreciate you all being here today. Thank you. Madam Chair, I yield back.
Thank you. I now recognize Mr. Dwight, Representative Dwight Evans for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think Dr. Strand, I want to ask you this question. I'm a member of the Ways and Means Committee, and trade has been an important issue recently. When trading with foreign countries, it's important to make sure that the countries we are trading with have fair labor practices and aren't violating human rights. Many small businesses participate in international trade. To any member, particularly starting off with you, how can the owners of small businesses make sure the goods they are importing aren't coming from companies that with harsh working conditions using unfair labor practices?
Thank you very much for the question. Such an important question, and I would suggest a real challenge for small businesses that have limited resources to necessarily get out in their supply chains. Some of the larger companies that have resources, there's an imperative on them to actually go visit suppliers, to be engaged. I would point to associations like what Mr. Stanley alluded to, the Sustainable Apparel Coalition, the SAC. Small businesses can join this, and through that, there's a weight. 50% of apparel in the world produced by the SAC. That can help small businesses understand their supply chains where they couldn't do it alone. So they need to join in a cross-industry collaboration to do this.
Okay. Is there anyone else on the panel who would like to comment on that question?
Yes, I think for companies of any size, I think from the time we were doing about $50 million, we audited conditions in the factories that sew our clothes. That auditing has been going on for 25 years, and as you know, with limited success. And right now, companies are just beginning to audit conditions in the mills and finding very serious problems. What we do at Patagonia is we have a fairly large social and environmental responsibility team that actually has veto power over our sourcing team, that if they determine that a factory or a mill is not ready or needs to meet certain conditions before we'll do business with them, what they say has veto power over sourcing. So that's, I think that would be a good policy for other companies to adopt.
Does anybody else on the panel?
Yeah, in Lancaster, there's a small business called Imagine Goods, which is a locally owned and woman-owned business for apparel clothing. The makers of the clothing are survivors of human sex trafficking in Cambodia. And one of the things that they do, I think, is they actually travel to Cambodia and meet the women that are making the clothing. So the auditing of their supply chain is probably the biggest way to prevent, unethical sources coming into the United States. So actually physically going there and auditing these factories is a good step.
Okay. I like to follow. Diversity in business is linked to profitability. Currently, women earn 82 cents for every dollar that a man makes. Women of color, the gap is even more substantial. African American women earn 62 cents. Native American women earn 58. Latino women earn 54 compared to white men. To any of the panel, what can small business owners do to make sure there is no gender or racial wage gap for the employees? Yes, Ms. Wallace?
So there's a number of things that you can do. One is be very intentional in your hiring practices, ensuring that you have a diverse employee base and a base that's reflective of your customers and your local communities and society. It takes intent to make that happen. The second is creating hiring and pay structures. So just what is the framework of your business? Who are you hiring? At what level of experience, what department? If you create a data-based framework for what the pay scale is at each level, and then you use that as you're hiring people, it's a great way to just continue to keep yourself in check around those practices.
I yield back the balance of my time. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. The gentleman, Representative Kevin Hearn, is now recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Shaun, I especially want to thank you for being here, fellow entrepreneur. It's great to see you here. Thanks to all the rest of the witnesses for being here as well. You know, as a small business owner for over 34 years, I've created a lot of jobs. Like many of you, if you're in business, you've had a lot of successes and a lot of failures, and you remember your failures much more so than you do your successes. What I have found over the years that the successful business people in the world are the ones who give back to their communities. They do this on a regular basis without any outside influence. They learn very quickly as part of the education process, which is much greater than any B school could ever teach you or any government could ever impose on you. In fact, I would say that small businesses play an instrumental role in the success of communities and have the ability to impact their cities and towns in ways that go way beyond job creation. As referenced by an article that our ranking member submitted for the record, a good example of this is Sonic's Limeade for Learning, a restaurant group that's based in Oklahoma City. Has a large presence in my home state, over, I think, 3,500 restaurants around, certainly, the United States. Works with the brand's franchisees and teachers to support educational programs and products for teachers. Through this program, customers at local Sonic locations are encouraged to vote online in support of educational materials, which Sonic then delivers to classrooms. This type of investment is something that every member of this committee should agree with and should support. However, we have a lot of colleagues that think government intervention and government mandates are the way that will make businesses be involved and hire and inclusion, and I totally disagree. In fact, I remind us what I consider a person who really promoted free markets. President Reagan once said the most terrifying words in the English language are, I quote, "I'm from the government and I'm here to help." And as a small business owner, I can tell you, over 34 years, I ran on the notion in Congress for the first time, never been in politics before, was get government out of the way, let entrepreneurs create jobs and put Americans to work. Patagonia didn't need the government to be involved to be where they're at today. In fact, they probably took business away from those who didn't see what you all saw and found a lane to run in. And I think that's what free markets do. They give people with entrepreneurial spirit, willing to take risk, and when they get knocked down, they get back up again. That's the true definition of the American dream. It's not having some outside force dictate to you how you're going to run your business. It's clear that small businesses are able to make a real difference in the communities without government. The government's involvement in this area will only further convolute this issue and scare the businesses involved. And so, because of this, I'd like to focus on the great work that has been done so far. And as I stated earlier, there's a lengthy history of companies investing in their local communities, something the public needs to be better educated on. So, you know, Mr. Strand, Dr. Strand, I'd like to start with you and we'll kind of move down, if we could, quickly, because I'd certainly love to hear from Shaun on this. In your opinions, how can we continue to grow public education regarding corporate social responsibility and message this great work which has been done by so many small businesses across America?
Thank you very much for the question, and I couldn't agree more. Small business has created such goods for the American society in terms of jobs, the products and services, and government did not create that. But I would say we need smart policy. We need good rules that make good sense, that incentivize for the long term. And this is something where I think that an organization, this particular committee, to look at small business and all the good that it's done and to figure out from a stewardship perspective, which as opposed to an extractive perspective of ownership, how do we encourage stewardship? That's a long-term view. It's exactly what you're describing with the small business that you started. I would suggest that we need some policy frameworks, those legal frameworks, like what B Corps presents, and we should encourage that to be more mainstream rather than on the fringe.
Or possibly recognize those who achieve certain standards in communities, that there's a place to be rewarded for those
absolutely
successes they have. Mr. Stanley?
You know, one thought I would have is that a lot of the industries that are producing some of the greatest environmental harm are getting the greatest amount of government support. So if you want to equal the playing field, I would remove subsidies from some of those industries. And I agree with, I don't have a prescription for you, but I agree with you that it is really important at this time to build up the capacity of communities to have a strong local economy. And whatever you can do on this committee to support that, I think.
So that could be including making the small business tax cuts permanent beyond 2025 for small businessmen and women in America. Shaun, could you wrap up? What could we do better to help educate folks on what you're doing and giving back to society?
You don't want to answer that question? I think simply, letting people know just like today, giving us the opportunity to let people know the impact that's being made when people do give back to the community.
We certainly thank you for being here. Thank you so much. Thanks to the witnesses.
Thank you. I now recognize the gentlelady from Kansas, Ms. Davis.
Thank you, Chairwoman. Well, first of all, thank you to all of the witnesses for being here today and sharing some of your expertise with us. I sit on this committee because the district that I represent, the 3rd District in Kansas, which is the Kansas City metro area, I often say we have entrepreneurship baked into the DNA of our community. And so getting the chance to sit here today and hear specifically about B Corps is a particular highlight because just last week I got the chance to participate with my colleague, Congressman Emanuel Cleaver, in presenting and honoring a B Corp in our area, Travoy, for all the work they've been doing in Native American communities, Alaska Native communities. And this concept of the triple bottom line, people, planet, profit, is something that I think a lot of businesses are moving toward. And in that vein, I think with Shaunese, it's really awesome to hear that in practice, where we've got what is an amazing example of a company that really, it sounds like, has defined success and what does success mean in your own way. So the first thing I would love to hear from you, Mr. Well, I want to say Shaun, but I also want to give you the respect you deserve as an entrepreneur and someone who's testifying before Congress today. Can you tell us what you think of as success for Shaunese?
Nope, go ahead. You know what success is.
Success is like, my mom knows the answer. I'm sorry.
Okay.
Oh.
Well, you want to be on the Ellen Show? Success would be what? If Target and Walmart licensed your designs?
Oh, yes.
Isn't that one of your dreams?
It does. Like a shopaholic.
A shopaholic, yeah.
Right?
That's not one of your designs, but you would like that, right? For somebody to license your designs and take it into big stores?
Yes. I need a store like to go to Walmart, Target, GameStop, and those other things. And it's on my own, but if you guys help me out.
Well, thank you for being here today and for sharing some of the numbers that you have in your testimony is very enlightening. And I've had the chance to meet with folks in my district. In fact, one of the first meetings I had was with Jawanda Mast, and her daughter Rachel Mast came in and told me all about her Able account and her about to embark on her college journey. And so I just really appreciate you taking the time to come and testify today. I guess the only other thing I would like to hear maybe from the rest of the panel is with B Corps, can you talk a little bit about how some of the existing SBA programs or those sorts of things that we have that are falling within the jurisdiction of this committee, how we can help support that model moving forward?
Actually, an organization, a nonprofit organization that was my former employer called Assets. One of the things that I did there was start a microloan program using SBA funds for that was meant for minority-owned businesses and women-owned businesses. One of the things that we did was pair that loan with the B impact assessment. So in order for small business owners to receive financing, they also had to take the B impact assessment so that way they can start to measure their social and environmental performance. And then along the way, we would actually incentivize them through rate discounts as they made improvements along that assessment. So it was a great pairing of finance and this measurement tool and assessment as a way to encourage folks to not just grow their own business, but also impact their community.
Thank you. I see my time has expired. I yield back. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. I now recognize Representative Bishop for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I compliment everyone on the panel, and I submit that that Mr. McElwee in particular, and all the folks who are entrepreneurs, you're actually great examples of capitalism. That is to say, individuals under no compunction or constraint of some outside force acting in their own enlightened self-interest. In January 2012, Governor Mitch Daniels in Indiana made an important point regarding corporate social responsibility in his State of the Union response. He said that out here in Indiana, when a business person asks me what he can do for our state, I say, first, make money, be successful. If you make a profit, you'll have something left to hire someone else and some to donate to the good causes we love. Jobs and philanthropy are only possible when businesses are successful. And a business can only be successful when it creates a good or service that provides value to its customers. In its essence, capitalism is a mechanism that is amoral in character, but it produces outcomes that have broad social utility. It is capitalism that has reduced world poverty by 80% just since 1970. In Asia, it is capitalism that reduced the number of people living in extreme poverty from almost 60% to just 1.7%. As Arthur Brooks often notes, that is one of the most remarkable and compassionate achievements in human history. One could even say this is the most successful example in history of corporate social responsibility. It is clearly important for businesses to be good corporate citizens, but I think it is important that we as policymakers not mistakenly impugn capitalism and thereby lose sight of the most effective, proven way in history to improve the lives of our constituents. Capitalism and successful business have and will continue to provide the greatest benefit to the needy and those of most modest means. I have a question, in particular, I think, for Professor Strand, if I might. Would you agree that capitalism has been the most successful economic system in the world's history for reducing human suffering and making the world a better place?
There has been no greater poverty alleviating program in the history of humankind than the concept of capitalism and the application of it. Absolutely. So I think that it's imperative on us to ensure that this system, broadly defined as capitalism, survives and thrives. And with that, then, to recognize that capitalism is a very broad construct that can be applied in different places in different ways. So let's go about the pragmatic work of improving it to ensure that it lives on.
And so if I could follow that up, Professor Strand, isn't it also the heart of capitalism that individual decision makers, individual entrepreneurs, might subordinate narrow or short-term profiteering goals in order to maximize profits in the longer term? For example, Henry Ford in 1914 massively increased, doubled prevailing assembly line wages in order to both produce a reliable workforce and create customers for his mass-produced Model T. Isn't that an example of what capitalists may do, in fact, do every day, everywhere, every hour?
I think capitalism at its best is when the capital owners behave as stewards. That's a long-term view. I have some concerns about pressures in an American context on short-termism. And in my past experience in corporate America, particularly when I was in investor relations, I felt at times the owners had a more extractive view of their ownership role. And I think we need good policy and mechanisms to ensure a stewardship model.
Would you agree that the best way to do that is to increase the ability of individual actors to make decisions, or do you think they need to be compelled to make decisions by government policy?
I think we need smart policy, and within smart policy framework, then individuals can maximize their own self-interest, and it benefits society.
I thank the chairman, and I yield back.
Thank you. I now recognize Representative Hagedorn for his 5 minutes.
Madam Chair, thank you for yielding, and appreciate all the witnesses' testimony. I first off would like to associate myself with the remarks of Representative Bishop. I thought he was absolutely on point. That was just terrific, and we'll talk just a little bit about that in a second. But first, Mr. Mcelwee, I have that right? Ms. Mcelwee, thank you for being here. Your mere presence today, you can tell, has made a profound impact on this panel, on our committee, and Ranking Member Stauber, other members of the committee, my family and others have folks with special needs, and you being here helps in a number of ways. And I just would say the most basic fundamental way, you've demonstrated that every life has value. And we appreciate you bringing your story to the committee and to explain to us how you have a small business interest and how you're using that to help other people realize that every life has value. So it's very important. As an entrepreneur and a philanthropist, you're way ahead of the game. You're about ahead of 97% of Americans who don't, have never had that luxury to be in that position. What do you think is the future of your business? And then also, have you heard from some of the people, for instance, that you've sent some of your wares to and back from the families? What's their reaction been to your products and to your business line?
You're deferring to me again. We receive, Shaun has his own social media accounts, and he gets pictures of the new babies wearing his baby onesies, even though Shaun can't pronounce onesie.
It's veggies.
He gets pictures of the adorable babies. One of the goals of the letter that he sends, and the goal of us being on the TV show Born This Way, our family being on there, is to help parents move through the grief process of having a child with Down syndrome quicker. Because with lack of information at the beginning of, after they've received a diagnosis, many people go into the grief process. And our goal is to help them get to the point of acceptance quicker so they can enjoy their babies and then help them with their development from then. So Shaun has received quite a few letters from parents who've received them, and the Down syndrome associations that he's donated to have been very grateful.
Thank you.
Well, thank you. I'll be sure to try to log on and like some of your social media sites and follow you from now on. So appreciate that. So Mr. Strand, to kind of follow up, I wanted to talk with you just a little bit about your testimony, because I was concerned that it was a bit of a going against capitalism and almost undercutting some of the things that we've proven in the United States with our free enterprise capitalist system, that there is no better system. And when you look around the world, almost every breakthrough technology, everything that helps improve the standard of living, way of life, where was it developed and perfected? And right here in the United States. And it was through our system of free enterprise that was possible. I mean, you look at abundant, reliable, low-cost energy. That's the United States. That's the stuff that we did. all the things now where we're able to go find that energy and deliver natural gas at historic low prices, abundance. That's all because of our technology and what we've done here. And the transportation. The world thrives on that. Communications, agriculture in my district, we lead the world in how to go out and produce with higher yields and using even less land if we had to. You can go on through the list. Medical devices, medical therapies. The world piggybacks on what the United States does. We subsidize them in many ways, and the rest of the world steals our technology, China and Russia and others. If it weren't for the United States, which I would subscribe, that we've done more for the world than the world has done for us, where would we be? And I think it's most all because of our system of free enterprise capitalism that gives people the incentive and allows the markets and individuals, as Mr. Bishop said, to go out and work their magic. And that's a lot better system than having a bunch of academics, politicians, bureaucrats, or whoever from the top down telling us how to do it. That would be my position. If you'd like to respond, I'm sorry, you only have 16 seconds. I do apologize for that. I didn't do that on purpose. But
it's great, but America is not the only place in the world that's practiced capitalism. And so I look to the Nordics, and the pacemakers invented in the Nordic region. You've got Spotify, you've got Skype, and all these other things. So they do quite well on the innovation scale, and it's because of capitalism, but they've also put in very smart policy, and they recognize where do markets work well and where don't they. And they've pragmatically, rather than ideologically, pragmatically developed their version of capitalism, and I think we can draw inspiration. Just like they've drawn inspiration from America, I think that maybe we can look outside of our walls also and draw inspiration from elsewhere too.
All right. Thank you for your testimony.
Thank you. The gentlelady, Representative Radewagen, is now recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chairwoman. And I want to welcome all of you here today. Special welcome to Shaun. And let's see. So some may think CSR means only one, philanthropy or environmental sustainability, and some may think companies don't do enough in all areas of CSR. How can we recognize all efforts in a way that encourages people to follow their conscience towards what is most needed? Dr. Strand.
Purpose is such a strong motivator. And I think each and every one of us, we can connect on purpose. And it might mean different things to different people, what that purpose is. But I think this is something that a reason I welcome the Business Roundtable's expression is I think it opens up the door for us to be able to actually talk about things that historically weren't allowed in the rough and tumble sort of financially oriented model of capitalism that we have here in the States. And I think that purpose is such a strong motivator. And I have the privilege to work with these wonderful students every single day. They want to work for firms that are purpose-driven. They want to work for a firm like yours that is so fundamentally oriented to purpose. So I think that that's something that we need to encourage and foster.
Mr. Arroyo.
Yeah, I'd like to second that. I think having a purpose-driven organization or small business is a great way to make sure that, we're not doing we're not seeking profit for profit's sake, but it's a tool to allow us to solve problems. And one of the things I do want to comment on is, we can think of capitalism and government almost as a mentor for a lot of us, right? Setting guidelines for small business owners to think about how can we do this better. And a lot of times entrepreneurs enter the small business world with no barriers or not understanding how they can do this better. So we can provide that framework for them to do things in a good way.
Ms. Wallace?
So the majority of entrepreneurs are creating businesses to solve their problems and the problems that are meaningful to them that need to be solved. So they're laser focused on that aspect of it. But there is a greater framework that ties into not just solving the problem, but building a business that is sustainable and long-term. There's resources, there's funding, of which there's a great lack of funding when it comes to women and minorities. But there's also the framework for success. So as the CEO of Elevate, when we took our B Corp assessment, we received our score, and through that assessment saw a number of ways in which we could improve our workforce policies, our impact on the world. We made those improvements. We saw not only an increase in our profits, we saw an increase in the retention of our employees, in their focus and productivity, in their satisfaction with the business. So having the tools and the framework to not just solve the problems that you care about, but to do it successfully and sustainably is a key aspect that I think is important to create.
Mr. Stanley?
I would echo what Ms. Wallace says. And I do think that the B Corp movement is a significant asset in building businesses that are governed well, that are successful, and that are serving some kind of common good. It's interesting with the assessment that's been referred to, the assessment allows 200 points for businesses. And what happens is you create a kind of virtuous competition. So Patagonia has been lauded by a number of people because we have a score of 152, which is very high for a B Corp. But we're looking at Dr. Bronner's Soap Company, which has a score of 175, and wondering what we can do in order to improve our practices to reach a level like that. And I think that that's the kind of framework that would help a number of small businesses be successful in all ways.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. I yield back the balance of my time.
Thank you very much, and I appreciate all the time that we've all taken out of our schedules to be with us today. We have heard today that there is a value generated by companies that is broader than just financial return. They provide jobs, develop communities, produce valuable goods that benefit consumers. For businesses to act in a responsible way towards their employees, suppliers, communities, and environments is not only the right thing to do, but it is good business as well. Small firms already know that being socially and environmentally responsible by treating customers and employees fairly leads to more sales, happier employees, and a stronger Main Street. I look forward very much to working with my colleagues on both sides of the aisle to craft policy that encourages large and small businesses to see the value of acting in a socially and environmentally responsible way that benefits our society and economy. I would ask unanimous consent that members have 5 legislative days to submit statements and supporting materials for the record. Without objection, so ordered. And if there is no further business to come before the committee, we are adjourned. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
You're welcome.